Today we are going to respond to a video claiming that Asians' economic and cultural success in America is a myth, and hence is only used as an excuse to dismiss systemic racism. Let's check it out.
America is so racist. Why are Asians the highest earners in America?
Do you know that Asian Americans face the highest poverty rates in New York City?
What she is saying is true, as the Asian American poverty rate in New York City is 26.6%. As shown in the Huffpo article, many of these poorer Asian communities are not proficient in English and are struggling because of it. According to a study done by Sharon Wang, Ezio Taki, and Arthur Sakamoto, most white adults are native-born, but most Asian adults are foreign-born, and Asian immigrants are less fluent in English than domestic Americans. In addition, they are less familiar with labour market practices and institutions, as well as have less social networks. So it is harder for them to navigate through the labour force, decreasing their earnings potential. None of these barriers are based on race, and would explain the higher Asian poverty rates in New York. In fact, since Asian Americans generally have a higher median income in spite of these factors, it is a testament to racial equality and hard work. Also, New York City is not representative of America. Keep these factors in mind for the rest of the video.
Chinatown restaurant and construction workers live here, in 64 square feet cubicles for $9 a day.
Here she is talking about 81 Bowery, where, surprise surprise, the Asian migrants there speak very little English and are undocumented, which leads to this suffering. This is the reason why people want immigrants to speak English, so they can live the best life possible in America.
1 in 4 elders live in poverty.
Now I have been getting contradictory figures for the elderly Asian poverty rate, where it is 12.7% in this article, but she may be referring to New York again, as links from 2 different articles talking about this led to the same source. Nevertheless, this is still higher than the average poverty rate of 9%, and is much higher for certain ethnic groups like Cambodians at over or near 20%. But this is explained by recent elder immigrants who have no savings or a social safety net, while other ethnic Asian elders had lower poverty rates because their ancestors immigrated in the late 1800s. Asian American elders also generally receive less social security benefits because they have worked less years as immigrants, and less fluency in English leads to less application for social security benefits. This explains the higher poverty rate for Asian elders, not racial discrimination.
Some collect 5-cent cans to make ends meet.
Yeah, this is just in California, and again, not necessarily representative of Asian American elders, and can again be explained by a lack of English fluency and immigration status.
Or what about ICE deporting Cambodian Americans who came here as children fleeing from a genocide that the US helped create?
Yeah, some of these Cambodian American refugees committed crimes, and their parents didn't understand the US citizenship process for their kids due to a lack of fluency in English. I am sensing a pattern here. There's been complaints that some weren't born in Cambodia, but really they were born in like the Thailand border or something, after escaping the genocide. So really these are technicalities rather than malicious intent. And sure, America has had problems with foreign policy, but they were doing it against communism, which had a very heavy body count. Though there is an argument that the refugees were in tough neighborhoods, which contributed to the crime.
But when you think of Asian Americans, you think Crazy Rich Asians and Netflix's Bling Empire.
Oops, sorry, I was too busy to watch that movie, or have a Netflix account, because my strict Asian parents made me study hard or I'd get slapped. And I would probably do the same to my kids when I'm older.
Only model minority stories are publicized, while disadvantaged Asian Americans get ignored. The groups at the top were only led in the US if they were already rich and educated, and the groups at the bottom are usually refugees.
Oh, this is interesting. When I first looked at her graph, I saw the words wage gap, which is usually associated with gender than race, so was a tiny bit odd. Regardless, I thought I was overthinking this, but decided to check the graph out. Well, this specific graph appears to originate from this site, and when I looked at its source, I got to the Center for American Progress website. But this graph wasn't about the average incomes of each Asian ethnic group and compared to the average white income. It was the average incomes of Asian American women versus the average incomes of white men, as in the differences in her graph had to do more with gender than race. The Center for American Progress was complaining about these gender disparities, but I think most of us now know that most of the gap is explained by hours worked, childbearing, different fields, negotiating ability, as well as others. Instead, I looked up a table on Wikipedia, which is sourced by the US Census. From this, I created my own graph. where only 2 Asian ethnic groups were lower than the average white income, while 14 other groups earned above the average white income. How's that for white privilege?
This model minority myth not only erases Asian suffering and struggles, it's also used to demonize the Black and Latino community for living in poverty by denying the existence of systemic racism.
Now, I personally think a higher median income for one minority group doesn't disprove racial discrimination for another minority group. But there is one factor that you have forgot to mention, and that is culture, specifically the rate of out-of-wedlock births. The rate of births to unmarried mothers is 30% and 27.2% for native whites and Asians respectively, but it is 77.7% and 56.9% for native blacks and Hispanics respectively. Now you may say this is due to past systemic discrimination, but back in 1965, the black community had a 24% out-of-wedlock rate, yet it jumped to 64% in 1990. This rate also increased for other races, but not as much as the black community. And it is unlikely this increase is due to racism, considering racial attitudes significantly improved and systemic elements of racism were removed during this time period. I really doubt the drug war increased the rate by 40% in 25 years. I personally believe the cause is the welfare state, but this article has a more interesting and nuanced discussion on this topic, and I encourage all of you to read it. Anyway, this lack of marriages led to instability such as teenage pregnancies and infidelity, which increased fatherlessness for all racial groups, but mostly for Black and Hispanic Americans at a rate of 41.6% and 29.6% respectively. This is significant, as a child lacking a two-parent household will more likely commit crime and be in poverty, as well as other negative indicators. This disparity doesn't seem to be due to an unavailability of birth control, as black teenagers have had sexual intercourse on average 20% more than white teenagers, and Hispanic teenagers had 10% more than white teenagers on average. Disgusting, I know, but sorry. I prefer there were none as a conservative, but one problem at a time. Luckily the rate has fallen in recent years, so there may be hope yet. But marriage, education and work need to be followed to close the racial disparities. When all 3 steps are followed of getting a high school diploma, working full-time and being married before having kids, 90% of whites and 84% of both blacks and Hispanics achieve upper or middle income status. Of course there are racial disparities in the success sequence, but I explained it in last week's video, which you can watch in the card above. There is more to say about systemic racism, but I am exhausted and will save that for another video. I really doubt she will see this video. But if she does, I am open to a discussion about this topic, if she is fine with it. And frankly, she made some interesting points and made me work hard in my research, so I would love to talk. Feel free to tell me if I got anything wrong here, and as always, sources are in the description. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give a like and comment, as it really helps my video in the YouTube algorithm. And if you like economics and political commentary, consider subscribing. Maybe follow me on my Twitter, and see you later.